I was halfway up the front steps with a box of my late wife's winter sweaters, when the metal chain shrieked across the asphalt like a furious violin, and cinched my moving truck to the neighborhood mailbox with a padlock so fat it could anchor a yacht. And there, in an orange HOA vest that glowed like a traffic cone at sunrise, stood Karen Peton, real estate tyrant, amateur despot, and self-appointed warden of Meadowbrook Estates, arms folded, chin high, curls crisp with hairspray, telling me, with a voice that rattled the azaleas, I wasn't leaving without her written permission, as if freedom itself required a permission slip signed in gel pen. I'm Dalton Reed, 58, a contractor who spent a lifetime pulling homes back from the brink, and ever since cancer took my wife Sarah 2 years ago, our house has felt like a museum of stuck time. Her mug, her glasses, the sweater still dented at the elbows. So I bought a little cabin out by Lake Hartwell, where she used to whisper, "Someday," and I decided someday could be now, but Karen had other liturgies to recite, new scripture she'd carved into the HOA stone tablets, and as I reached for the stupid chain, she shoved me, and I stumbled into gravel, stinging palms, the taste of copper at the back of my tongue, while landscaping stones, God help me, started flying from somewhere behind her militia of flinching neighbors, pinging off the truck windows until one cracked in a spiderweb I'd later pay to replace. "Ma'am, this is insane," I said, and she jabbed a manicured finger at the camera on my phone, shrieking that my mailbox belonged to the community, that my house numbers were community assets, that everything I thought was mine was actually hers on loan, and when the moving driver, a veteran of 1,000 dramas, muttered he wasn't getting in the middle, she hissed that he was now an accessory to theft. Somewhere a dog barked, somewhere a curtain fluttered, and somewhere the cogs in my head clicked into a rhythm that felt like fight or flight, finally choosing fight. Because here's what Karen didn't know. My son Marcus works financial crimes for the FBI, and while I told him this was neighborhood nonsense, he'd said words I couldn't shake: harassment, extortion, mail fraud, wire fraud, words that sounded like the names of doors we might soon be walking through. And there was another secret humming under the floorboards. I discovered that before Sarah got too sick to climb the stairs, she'd quietly started investigating Karen's strange invoices and phantom consultants, tucking labeled USB drives into corners of her office like a squirrel hides walnuts, and in those files, which I hadn't yet found, was a road map to the wreckage Karen had left hidden beneath our hydrangeas. 3 weeks earlier I'd filed every moving form precisely, 30 days notice, 0 debt, inspection agreed, only to hear Karen invent a community impact assessment and insist I hire a $2,500 transition consultant who happened to be her sister Brenda, and when I refused, construction cones and threatening letters sprouted like mushrooms after rain. My cabin cellar got spooked by rumors, and Facebook filled with sanctimonious paragraphs about men who abandon commitments, the kind of social media confetti that sticks to your reputation even after you shower. That morning in the street, Karen came back dressed for battle, vest, clipboard, measuring tape swinging like a sheriff's lariat, and declared I was violating Section 47B, a rule nobody had ever heard of, because it had been minted in her head between a glass of Chardonnay and an Amazon cart of zip-tie handcuffs, which she then held up with pious drama, announcing a citizen's arrest, while her 3 hand-picked neighbors, Tom, Mrs. Patterson, and a young dad named Mike, shifted like conscripts drafted by a queen with a grudge. I kept filming, and when I called them by name, fear trembled free. She'd threatened Tom with fence fines, threatened to report Mrs. Patterson's ancient dog for noise, and told Mike his mailbox black wasn't black enough. And once the truth cracked, light poured in. Karen's allies were captives. The moving driver, a calm professional, chimed in that she'd offered him $200 to accidentally damage my stuff. Her mouth opened and closed like a broken stapler, and I remembered a contractor buddy's lecture on citizens' arrests, felonies witnessed, immediate danger, none of which applied to mailboxes. So I dialed 911, while Karen dialed 911, and when officers Martinez and Cruz arrived, hands on hips, sun in their eyes, they listened to her talk about secret plans and sacred numbers and community documents, then looked at my deed, then at the zip ties, and told her, with the weary kindness of men who've said this too often, that HOA bylaws don't beat property law, that you can't claim someone's driveway because the stencil font matches the neighborhood newsletter. They left her with a warning about false reports and the kind of silence that follows popped balloons, and I'd like to say that was the end. But at 2 in the morning she rang my doorbell for an emergency inspection, waved a flashlight and fake section numbers like the world was on fire, reeked of vanilla and wine, tried to shoulder through my front door, then filed dawn complaints with city inspectors about imaginary plumbing and electric, sent cease and desist letters from Peton Legal Services, and when I changed my locks, found them changed back with a note taped up that read, "Property secured pending investigation," as if my home were a crime scene and she the only cop. That's when fate handed me an envelope on my own kitchen counter I'd never seen before, bank statements for a company called Community Improvement Solutions LLC, and my scalp prickled with the feeling you get when the magic trick stalls, and you see the wires. I took pictures of everything, filed the police reports, texted Marcus, and started stacking dots like ladders. Fake liens on my door for $15,000 in invented fees, a call to Child Protective Services slandering Marcus as mentally unstable, another round to my cabin seller hinting I was under federal investigation, a forged foreclosure packet delivered by a nervous process server, who fled when I explained how case numbers are supposed to look, and somewhere in the blur, between the tire/truck and the taped threats about community participation deficiency, I understood her goal wasn't just to stop my move, it was to break my life into pieces she could carry. The next day Marcus called with a voice like a sealed file. Karen's shell companies were already in our fraud databases, patterns in 3 states, jumps from board to board, embezzlement that moved like a flock of birds, and he believed Sarah had seen it before any of us, because when he flew in and we opened